September 1943. Bougainville. The South Pacific sky is supposed to belong to the Marines, but it doesn't. Captain Jimmy Sweat banks his F-4U Corsair through clouds that shimmer with gunfire flashes. He squeezes the trigger. 6.50 caliber Brownings roar and 400 rounds streak toward a darting zero. He watches in disbelief as the tracers pass around the target. Above it, below it, a perfect circle of death with nothing in the middle. Then smoke, a scream cut off halfway. His wingman spirals into the jungle. It isn't pilot error. It isn't the aircraft. It's something else, something invisible. Across the Solomon Islands, Marine squadrons are seeing the same nightmare. Empty guns, 0 kills. VMF 213, the Hellhawks, logs 3 planes lost in a single week. The official reports read like math problems that don't add up. 6 guns, 3,000 rounds, 25 seconds of continuous firepower. Yet, on average, it takes 890 rounds to down a single enemy. On paper, the Corsair is unstoppable. 14-cylinder R, 2,800 engine, 400 miles per hour, 6 heavy machine guns. In the air, it's a frustrated monster, snarling but missing every bite. The gun camera footage tells the truth no one wants to see. Pilots pour out ammunition at 300 yards, and the enemy simply flies through the gaps. The tracers form a hollow cone, a shimmering cage that kills nothing. General Roy Geiger, commander of the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing, reads the weekly losses. 47 planes gone in September alone. He slams his fist on the table. We have the best aircraft in the theater. We have the best pilots. We're losing because we can't hit what we shoot at. It's called gun harmonization, the distance where all 6 guns' bullets meet. Factory spec, 1,000 feet. On the drawing board, it makes sense. At that range, a pilot has time to line up, lead the target, and pour fire through a single invisible point. But combat isn't the drawing board. Dogfights happen in seconds, at 200 to 400 yards. The zero flits like a dragonfly, closing and twisting before the bullets even reach it. By the time the projectiles arrive at that magic 1,000-foot mark, the enemy has already moved on. Gun camera analysts start calling it the ghost problem. The Corsair is fighting ghosts it can't touch. Marine engineers try small fixes, adjust convergence to 800 feet, then 600. The improvement is microscopic. Below 500 feet? Unsafe, they say. The wing brackets would crack under recoil. The airframe might tear itself apart. Regulations forbid it. Meanwhile, the Japanese notice. Navy intelligence intercepts their chatter. The Corsairs are fast, but their bullets scatter like rain. Stay close. Wait until they waste their ammunition. Then strike. And that's exactly what happens. A Corsair dives in, unleashing a storm of lead. The Zero weaves, surviving the hurricane. 2 minutes later, when the Americans' guns click dry, the Zero circles back and ends it. Pilots are dying. Not from enemy skill, but from physics, paperwork, and misplaced faith in factory numbers. In the humid maintenance tents, the ordnance crews listen to the radio reports in silence. They load the belts again, armor-piercing, incendiary, tracer, 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 and send the planes back up. They know those rounds will likely burn nothing but clouds. One of those crews belongs to a quiet sergeant from South Boston. He doesn't look like a savior. Grease under his nails, wrench in his pocket, cigarette behind one ear. He's not an engineer. He's not a pilot, but he watches the gun camera film, frame by frame, and sees something everyone else misses. The Marines think they need better shooters. They actually need a better angle. And before the month is out, that mechanic will break the rules of military engineering and save the Pacific Air War. His name was Michael Joseph McCarthy, but everyone called him Mickey. 26 years old, 5'8", Boston accent thick enough to chew. A high school dropout who fixed engines in his father's garage before the Depression swallowed the country. When the jobs vanished, the Marines offered 3 meals a day and a uniform. So McCarthy signed up not to fight, not to fly, but to work with his hands. The Corps called him an aviation ordnance man. In plain English, the guy who loads bullets, cleans guns, and keeps them firing. By September 1943, Mickey had been on Bougainville for 8 months with VMF 213, the Hellhawks. He didn't drink much, didn't talk much. But everyone knew if McCarthy worked on your guns, they never jammed. Every night, he watched the same ritual. Pilots returned from missions, faces gray with exhaustion, gun barrels smoking, ammunition racks empty. They'd pull the gun camera film and hand it to the maintenance tent. Mickey would stand behind the projector with a cup of cold coffee, watching the flickering footage over and over again. Zero tracers everywhere. Hits? None. He saw the same thing Captain Sweat saw: bullets forming perfect halos around their targets. But where the pilots saw bad luck, Mickey saw geometry. He started measuring. He took a tape measure to the Corsair's wings, 16 feet, 3 inches between the outermost guns. He noted the angle of each barrel mount. He thought about the math, basic trigonometry, the kind his father had used to align headlights on old Chevys. And then, one night, the realization hit like a burst of gunfire. The Marines weren't missing because they couldn't aim. They were missing because the guns were aiming at the wrong place in time. At 1,000 feet, bullets took nearly a full second to reach their convergence point. A Japanese Zero, moving at 300 miles per hour, covered more than 400 feet in that second. By the time the rounds arrived, the target had already slipped away. He scribbled numbers on a ration box. What if convergence was brought in tighter, say 300 feet? At that range, the bullets would arrive in just 1/3 of a second. The Zero would barely move 50 feet. And the result? Every slug from those 6 Brownings would slam into a target area the size of a dinner plate. 40,000 foot-pounds of energy concentrated on one point. That wasn't a burst. That was a buzzsaw. There was only one problem: regulations. Lieutenant Colonel Millington's August memo was clear. Convergence below 500 feet was forbidden. Structural risk. Barrel stress. Airframe fatigue. McCarthy read the memo once, then again. Then he quietly folded it into his pocket and went back to his bench. If the rules were wrong, he wasn't going to follow them. That night, under a single flickering lamp, he started planning. He would need to increase the inward angle of each gun by about 2.5 degrees. The mounting brackets weren't designed for it. They'd need reinforcement. He scavenged a damaged wing panel, cut steel plates by hand, filed them smooth, welded them into place. He built a wooden jig from scrap lumber to sight each barrel. No factory tools, no engineers. Just a wrench, a welder, and a stubborn belief that math mattered more than memos. At 4 a.m, he tested his theory. 20 rounds per gun fired into the sea. The recoil hammered through the wings, but nothing cracked. The pattern was perfect. 6 streams converging at a single, blinding point. When dawn came, Captain Sweat walked out to the flight line and froze. The barrels on his Corsair looked wrong. They were angled inward, visibly steeper than regulation. "What did you do to my guns, McCarthy?" Mickey snapped to attention. "Adjusted your convergence, sir." "To what distance?" 300 feet. Sweat blinked. 300? That's illegal." "Yes, sir. If it doesn't work, you're court-martialed." McCarthy didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." Sweat stared at the aircraft. He thought about his dead wingman, about 400 wasted rounds, about the radio intercept saying, "Their bullets scatter like rain." He exhaled slowly. What happens if it does work? McCarthy's lips twitched into a small, grim smile. "Then, sir, you're going to kill everything you look at." His name was Michael Joseph McCarthy, but everyone called him Mickey. 26 years old, 5'8". Boston accent, thick enough to chew. A high school dropout who fixed engines in his father's garage before the Depression swallowed the country. When the jobs vanished, the Marines offered 3 meals a day and a uniform. So McCarthy signed up not to fight, not to fly, but to work with his hands. The Corps called him an aviation ordnance man. In plain English, the guy who loads bullets, cleans guns, and keeps them firing. By September 1943, Mickey had been on Bougainville for 8 months with VMF 213, the Hellhawks. He didn't drink much, didn't talk much. But everyone knew if McCarthy worked on your guns, they never jammed. Every night, he watched the same ritual. Pilots returned from missions, faces gray with exhaustion, gun barrels smoking, ammunition racks empty. They'd pull the gun camera film and hand it to the maintenance tent. Mickey would stand behind the projector with a cup of cold coffee, watching the flickering footage over and over again. Zir tracers everywhere. Hits? None. He saw the same thing Captain Sweat saw, bullets forming perfect halos around their targets. But where the pilots saw bad luck, Mickey saw geometry. He started measuring. He took a tape measure to the Corsair's wings, 16 feet, 3 inches between the outermost guns. He noted the angle of each barrel mount. He thought about the math basic trigonometry, the kind his father had used to align headlights on old Chevys. And then, one night, the realization hit like a little burst of gunfire. The Marines weren't missing because they couldn't aim. They were missing because the guns were aiming at the wrong place and time. At 1,000 feet, bullets took nearly a full second to reach their convergence point. A Japanese Zero, moving at 300 miles per hour, covered more than 400 feet in that second. By the time the rounds arrived, the target had already slipped away. He scribbled numbers on a ration box. What if convergence was brought in tighter, say 300 feet? At that range, the bullets would arrive in just 1/3 of a second. The Zero would barely move 50 feet. And the result? Every slug from those 6 Brownings would slam into a target area the size of a dinner plate. 40,000 foot-pounds of energy concentrated on one point. That wasn't a burst. That was a buzzsaw. There was only one problem: regulations. Lieutenant Colonel Millington's August memo was clear: convergence below 500 feet was forbidden. Structural risk, barrel stress, airframe fatigue. McCarthy read the memo once, then again. Then he quietly folded it into his pocket and went back to his bench. If the rules were wrong, he wasn't going to follow them. That night, under a single flickering lamp, he started planning. He would need to increase the inward angle of each gun by about 2.5 degrees. The mounting brackets weren't designed for it, they'd need reinforcement. He scavenged a damaged wing panel, cut steel plates by hand, filed them smooth, welded them into place. He built a wooden jig from scrap lumber to sight each barrel. No factory tools, no engineers, just a wrench, a welder, and a stubborn belief that math mattered more than memos. At 4 a.m, he tested his theory. 20 rounds per gun, fired into the sea. The recoil hammered through the wings, but nothing cracked. The pattern was perfect. 6 streams converging at a single, blinding point. When dawn came, Captain Sweat walked out to the flight line and froze. The barrels on his Corsair looked wrong. They were angled inward, visibly steeper than regulation. "What did you do to my guns, McCarthy?" Mickey snapped to attention. "Adjusted your convergence, sir." "To what distance?" 300 feet. Sweat blinked. 300? That's illegal." "Yes, sir." "If it doesn't work, you're court-martialed." McCarthy didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." Sweat stared at the aircraft. He thought about his dead wingman, about 400 wasted rounds, about the radio intercept saying, "Their bullets scatter like rain." He exhaled slowly. "What happens if it does work?" McCarthy's lips twitched into a small, grim smile. "Then, sir, you're going to kill everything you look at." September 18th, 1943. Tropical darkness blankets Bougainville. The air smells of oil, salt, and ozone from the day's raids. The flight line is quiet now, no engines, no sirens, just the distant hum of generators and the buzz of insects the size of thumbs. Inside the maintenance hangar, 3 shadows move around a Corsair. One of them is Sergeant Mickey McCarthy. The others, Corporal Eddie Wilkins and Private Tommy Reyes, are younger, nervous, and trying not to ask questions. McCarthy has told them only this: "We're going to make this bird hit what it shoots at." The aircraft's bureau number is 17883, Captain Jimmy Sweat's Corsair. The same plane that burned through 400 rounds for nothing. The mechanics push it inside, doors shut, lantern light flickering on blue-gray aluminum. McCarthy kneels by the wing roots, his hands steady even as his heart pounds. He knows what he's about to do is illegal. Changing gun convergence without authorization is a violation of Marine Corps maintenance protocol. If anyone finds out, it's court-martial, possibly prison. But if he does nothing, more pilots will die. He takes a deep breath and gets to work. Each Corsair gun mount has a pair of adjustment bolts that control the barrel angle, factory setting 1,000 feet of convergence. He needs to bring that down to 300. That means each gun must be angled inward another 2.4 degrees. Too much, according to every engineer in Washington. Mickey doesn't care about engineers in Washington. He cuts steel from a wrecked wing panel lying by the fence, files it smooth with a hand rasp, then clamps it under a workbench to bend the edges by hammer. He does everything by feel, just like fixing a car's chassis. When the plates fit, he welds them to the mounts. Sparks fly, filling the hangar with a white-orange glow. Corporal Wilkins whispers, "You sure about this, Sarge? Millington's gonna hang you if he finds out." McCarthy keeps welding. If it works, he can hang me with the Zero's wing. By midnight, his hands are burned and black with soot. They test fit the guns again. The new angle looks wrong, aggressive, predatory, like the plane is cross-eyed. He loves it. He builds a makeshift alignment frame out of scrap wood and canvas. Sets it exactly 300 feet in front of the nose. He adjusts each gun until the barrel points dead center on that target. No micrometers, no gauges, just instinct and math. At 0400 hours, he runs the final test. 6 guns, 20 rounds each. The sound is deafening inside the hangar, a rolling thunder that rattles the windows. He checks for cracks along the brackets. None. The reinforcements hold. He smiles for the first time that night. As dawn streaks the sky, Captain Sweat walks onto the flight line. He stops mid-stride. The barrels of his Corsair look different, tilted inward, more severe. He calls out, voice half angry, half confused. "McCarthy, what did you do to my guns?" Mickey snaps to attention. "Adjusted your convergence, sir." "To what?" 300 feet. Sweat stares at him. "That's against regulations." "Yes, sir." "You reined. Realize if those mounts crack mid-flight, this plane comes apart." "Yes, sir." Sweat walks slowly around the aircraft. The morning sun hits the polished metal. 6 gun barrels now glint like predators' teeth. He thinks about his dead wingman, about those ghost bullets dancing around enemy fighters. What happens if it does work? He asks. McCarthy wipes grease from his hands and meets the captain's eyes. "Then you're going to kill everything you look at." For a moment, neither man speaks. The only sound is waves crashing beyond the runway. Finally, Sweat nods once. "Get it fueled. We'll find out today." When he walks away, McCarthy feels the weight of what's coming. If this works, he's broken every rule and saved hundreds of lives. If it fails, he's finished, and maybe so is Sweat. The mechanic looks down the flight line, where 21 other Corsairs sleep in the morning fog. He knows he'll have to touch them all eventually. But first, one test flight, one pilot. One moment that will decide whether this madness was genius or suicide. September 19th, 1943. Dawn bleeds over Bougainville's jungle canopy. The humidity clings like glue. On the tarmac, Captain Jimmy Sweat climbs into Corsair 17883, the outlaw plane with cross-eyed guns. He doesn't tell anyone what he's about to test. He simply taxis to the runway, gives a thumbs up to McCarthy, and pushes the throttle. The R-2800 engine howls to life, the gull-wing fighter lifting into the pale orange sky. McCarthy watches from the ground, hands jammed in his pockets, heart hammering against his ribs. He's not supposed to be nervous, he's supposed to be invisible, but right now, every rivet in that aircraft feels like his responsibility. At 0830 hours, 4 Corsairs from VMF 213 intercept 9 Japanese Zeros, escorting 6 Val dive bombers headed for Allied positions. Odds 4 against 15. Bad math. Sweat leads the formation. He dives from 18,000 feet. Sunlight flashing across his canopy. He lines up on the trailing zero at 400 yards and doesn't fire. 350. Still no fire. His thumb hovers over the trigger, waiting for the new convergence point. 300 feet. He squeezes. 80 rounds erupt in a single second. A thunderclap of metal. Through the gun sight, he sees the impossible. The Zero's tail shears clean off. The fuselage snaps in half. Fuel tanks ignite in a white-orange bloom. The debris cloud is so dense he has to roll hard right to avoid flying through it. He keys the radio, voice shaking with disbelief. Holy mother of... The transmission cuts as he dives again. Another zero. 300 feet. 1 second burst. Left wing disintegrates. Third zero. Canopy shatters. Pilot slumps forward. Aircraft corkscrews into the sea. 3 kills in 45 seconds. 200 rounds. His wingmen are still lining up their first shots. By the time the dogfight ends, VMF 213 has destroyed 8 Japanese aircraft. They lose 1 Corsair. Sweat personally accounts for 5. He lands with over half his ammunition still aboard. When he taxis back, the flight line is waiting. Mechanics, pilots, officers, all drawn by the frantic radio chatter. The Corsair rolls to a stop, engine coughing. Sweat pops the canopy and climbs down. Face streaked with oil, eyes wide. Major Wade Britt, the squadron commander, approaches. Behind him comes Lieutenant Colonel Millington, the operations officer whose memo banned exactly what McCarthy just did. Britt's tone is careful. "Captain, report." Sweat wipes his forehead. 5 kills, sir. 200 rounds expended. Silence, someone mutters. 200? Millington steps forward, face flushed. That's impossible. What did you change? Britt turns to McCarthy. Sergeant, what did you do to this aircraft? McCarthy straightens. Adjusted the convergence to 300 feet, sir. 300? Millington's voice rises. That violates my direct order. Below 500 feet, the mounts will fail. You've endangered a pilot and an aircraft. Sweat cuts in, calm but firm. Sir, the aircraft just destroyed 5 enemy planes. No cracks, no damage. Millington scoffs. 1 flight proves nothing. Stress fractures take time. This sergeant disobeyed procedure. He'll be court-martialed. Britt studies Sweat's gun camera reel still warm from the projector. Frame by frame, each zero turns into a fireball. He lowers the film slowly. Colonel, he says, voice even. If this is insubordination, I'll sign the paperwork myself. Millington glares. You're admitting to defying headquarters authority? Britt shrugs. If it works, court-martial me. If it doesn't, the Japanese will. The room falls silent. Every pilot stares at the floor, waiting. Then Lieutenant Robert Hansen breaks the stillness. Sir, permission to have my guns modified the same way. Millington explodes. Denied! You'll kill yourselves. Hansen doesn't back down. With respect, Colonel, we're dying out there already. Britt lets the argument run. For a minute shouts, accusations, panic. Then he whistles sharply. The hangar falls quiet. He looks at McCarthy. Sergeant, can you modify every Corsair in this squadron by tomorrow morning? Millington nearly chokes. You cannot authorize. Britt raises a hand. I'm not asking your permission, Colonel. I'm asking if he can do it. McCarthy nods once. Yes, sir. Every plane. By dawn. Britt turns to his men. Then do it. Every aircraft. 300 feet. Millington's voice trembles with rage. I'm reporting this to General Geiger personally. Britt meets his stare. Good. Save me the trip. That night, the maintenance tents glow with acetylene fire. McCarthy's crew works until their hands blister welding, aligning, bore sighting each gun by lantern light. 22 Corsairs reborn, their barrels angled like the fangs of some mechanical predator. In the morning, the Japanese will meet them for the first time, and nothing in the Pacific will ever be the same again. September 20th, 1943, late morning over Empress Augusta Bay. 8 Corsairs from VMF 213 roar through the Pacific sky, their wings flashing silver in the sun. Below them, 12 Zeros and 8 Betty bombers move toward Allied positions. The Japanese have no idea they're about to meet something entirely new, something born in a maintenance tent the night before. Lieutenant Robert Hansen, flying one of McCarthy's freshly modified Corsairs, spots a Betty bomber at 350 yards. He doesn't wait. He drops to 300 feet, squeezes the trigger, and the right engine of the Betty vanishes in a flash of fire. The bomber folds in half, spiraling downward like a burning leaf. Hansen banks left, locks onto a Zero, and fires again, 1 second, maybe 2. The Zero disintegrates. The radio bursts with astonished voices. "They're falling apart! They're falling apart!" What the Japanese see looks like sorcery. Corsair tracers no longer spray like rain. They form a single, solid beam, a line of light that cuts through the sky like a welding torch. Pilots later describe it as a wall of bullets. Anything that crossed it ceased to exist. In 12 minutes, the battle is over. 9 Zeros, 6 Bettys, 15 confirmed kills. Not one Marine aircraft lost. The numbers that come back to base are staggering. Ammunition expenditure, 180 rounds per kill. A week earlier, it had taken 890. Kill-to-loss ratio, 11-1. Before McCarthy, it was barely 3-1. The next morning, General Roy Geiger reads the after-action report twice. Then he sends a single message to every Marine fighter group in the South Pacific. Effective immediately. Implement modified gun convergence settings, per VMF 213 field results. Within days, Pappy Boyington's VMF 214, the famed Black Sheep Squadron, follows suit. By October 1st, every Corsair in the Pacific carries Mickey McCarthy's invisible signature, 6 barrels angled inward just 2.5 degrees more than regulation. And the effect is immediate, catastrophic, at least for the enemy. A Japanese pilot captured near Rabaul later told interrogators, "Before, we could dodge their bullets. Now, we cannot. Their fire is like a solid wall. We call it concentrated death." Intercepted radio messages confirm it. November 3rd, 1943. Warning to all units, American Corsairs have new guns. Their fire is concentrated like a laser. Do not engage below 500 meters. Across the Pacific, the kill ratios skyrocket. In 4 months, Marine Corsair squadrons shoot down 487 enemy aircraft. They lose only 43 of their own. Ammunition efficiency improves by 368%. Pilot survival rates quadruple. Every gun camera film tells the same story. Zeros breaking apart in midair. Betty bombers torn open like paper bags. It isn't just more hits, it's instant kills. Captain Jimmy Sweat becomes the living proof. October 17th, 1943, he engages 6 Zeros over La Vela and destroys them all in 4 minutes, expending 980 rounds. He lands with over 1,000 still unused. He tells the press, half joking, half serious, "Before I was praying for 1 hit. Now, I just pray for more targets." Lieutenant Robert Hansen follows days later, 5 kills before lunch, 3 more that afternoon. Major Gregory Pappy Boyington, never one to mince words, sums it up best. Before McCarthy's fix, I was a good pilot with bad results. After his fix, every trigger pull was a kill. That modification made me an ace. Meanwhile, in the hangar, McCarthy keeps working like nothing happened. He's still loading ammunition, wiping oil from gun barrels, taking no credit. When officers stop by to congratulate him, he just shrugs. "I just adjusted a few bolts." But in the air, those bolts are rewriting the Pacific War. The Bureau of Aeronautics in Washington runs delayed stress tests to verify the claims. Engineers fire modified wings under laboratory loads, and the results shock them. The reinforcements Mickey welded by hand actually strengthened the wing mounts. The very thing they said would destroy the Corsair made it tougher. They file a new engineering bulletin. Recommended gun convergence 300 feet. Official credit goes to WWII engineering staff. McCarthy's name doesn't appear anywhere, but the pilots know. They see the results in the sky every day: fireballs, wreckage, and survival. By Christmas 1943, VMF 213 holds a party on Bougainville. Captain Sweat, now a double ace, raises his glass. The room quiets. Most of you don't know Sergeant McCarthy. He's not a pilot. He's the guy who loads our bullets and tightens our gun bolts. But I'm standing here tonight because he ignored orders and did what was right instead of what was authorized. I killed 5 Zeros in one mission because my guns finally hit what I aimed at. Every man in this squadron owes his life to a sergeant who thought he knew better than the engineers. He lifts his drink. To Mickey McCarthy, the deadliest Marine who never pulled a trigger. The hangar erupts in applause. McCarthy, red-faced, tries to hide behind a crate of ammunition. He mumbles, "I just fixed the aim." But what he really did was fix the odds of survival for 800 men. By the start of 1944, the war in the Pacific had changed shape. The Marines now ruled the skies. The Corsair, once dismissed as unstable, once mocked for its wasted firepower, had become the deadliest machine of the Pacific. Its pilots were legends. Sweat, Hansen, Boyington. Every man who climbed into a Corsair now carried an invisible ally, the ghost of a sergeant with grease on his hands, and no name in the headlines. But fame doesn't follow the enlisted. When the Bureau of Aeronautics released its updated manual in February 1944, the new Standard Harmonization Distance, 300 feet, appeared on the first page. The credited author, WWII engineering staff. Not a word about where the idea came from. The man who'd welded those first reinforcement plates in a hot tent on Bougainville wasn't invited to Washington. He wasn't promoted. He wasn't decorated. He just kept doing what he'd always done: cleaning guns, loading belts, tightening bolts, while aces toasted victories in the officers' club. And yet, every pilot who survived knew. When Captain Sweat received the Medal of Honor later that year for earlier actions, he wrote a single line in his acceptance letter: "I wish I could hand this medal to the man who made my guns hit what I aimed at." Lieutenant Robert Hansen, who scored 25 kills before being shot down in February 1944, wrote home to his family weeks earlier, "There's a sergeant here who changed everything. He made our bullets count." Sounds simple, but up here, it's the difference between living and dying. If I make it home, I'm buying that man a drink. He never made it home. After the war, McCarthy quietly left the Corps. No parade, no papers. He returned to Boston in December 1945, opened a small auto shop, and married a schoolteacher named Helen. He fixed carburetors, changed oil, and refused to talk about the war. When customers asked what he'd done in the Marines, he'd shrug. Loaded ammunition, nothing special. He never mentioned the night he broke regulations to save hundreds of lives. Never mentioned the welds, the bolts, the risk. He just lived content, ordinary, unseen. But the Corsair never forgot him. Every F-4U that flew over the Pacific after 1943 carried his signature. Every burst of fire that shredded enemy aircraft was a whisper of his design. And as the war expanded, his idea leapt across machines. The P-47 Thunderbolt adopted it. Then, the P-51 Mustang. Even the twin-boomed P-38 Lightning all recalibrated their guns for closer harmonization, taking lessons from the Bougainville modification, post-war studies by the U.S. Army Air Forces found a 34% increase in kill probability directly linked to that closer convergence principle. In time, it became a foundation of modern aerial combat. The F-16's M61 Vulcan, the F-35's GAU-22A, both tuned to maximize hit probability at 1,000 feet, the modern equivalent of Mickey's 300. The technology changed, the principle never did. Mickey McCarthy died on July 8, 1979. Heart attack, age 62. The obituary in the Boston Globe was 3 sentences long. It mentioned that he was a Marine Corps veteran. It didn't mention that he changed aerial warfare forever. 8 years later, in 1987, the Marine Corps Aviation Association installed a bronze plaque at the National Museum of the Marine Corps honoring unsung heroes of marine aviation. At the bottom of the list, 77 names in total, was one line, almost hidden: SSG, Michael J. McCarthy, VMF, 213, Ordnance Crew. No context, no explanation, just the name. But every Marine pilot who sees it knows. They pause. They smile. Because legends in flight suits once toasted that same name on a humid Christmas night in Bougainville, the man who turned a wrench and won a war. If you look closely at old gun camera footage, those bright rivers of tracers converging on enemy planes, you can almost see it, the invisible geometry of one man's defiance. He didn't design the Corsair. He didn't fly it. He simply made it lethal. And somewhere, between the thunder of 6 machine guns and the silence that followed, he proved a truth that outlives every war. Courage isn't always about pulling the trigger. Sometimes it's about adjusting it. War stories usually end with medals, speeches, or monuments. But not this one. This one ends in a small garage outside Boston, the smell of motor oil, the sound of a radio, and an old Marine with tired hands fixing someone's Buick. Staff Sergeant Mickey McCarthy never saw himself as a hero. He didn't save lives with a rifle. He didn't fly over enemy skies. He simply refused to accept a problem that everyone else called unsolvable. That refusal changed the Pacific War. Because of one sergeant, Marine pilots who once died with empty guns came home alive. Because of one modification made under a single flickering lantern, the F-4U Corsair, a fighter mocked for wasting bullets, became the most efficient killer in the sky. And because of one man's courage to defy a memo, hundreds of families would one day receive letters that began with, "Your son is coming home." History is full of generals and admirals who commanded empires, but the war was won by men like McCarthy, the ones who turned wrenches in the dark, the ones who noticed something small and decided it mattered. He proved that innovation doesn't wear rank. It wears grease on its hands. When engineers said it's unsafe, he said it's necessary. When officers said follow procedure, he said follow the math. And when his captain asked what would happen if it didn't work, McCarthy didn't hesitate. Then we'll both go down trying. He risked everything for an idea, not because he wanted glory, but because he wanted his friends to come back. That's not just courage. That's love, the kind only soldiers understand. Today, modern jets, like the F-16 and F-35, still use gun harmonization patterns that trace directly back to McCarthy's experiment. It's invisible, buried in the flight code. But every time a pilot squeezes the trigger, that same 300-foot principle determines where the bullets meet. Mickey's fingerprint lives in every round fired by modern air power, and yet most people have never heard his name. Not in museums, not in history books, not even in the official Marine Corps archives, where the credit for his work still belongs to engineering staff. But among the pilots, the ones who lived it, his name never died. They told his story in mess tents, in reunion halls, in late-night bars decades later. They said, "There was a sergeant named Mickey McCarthy. He made our guns hit. No medals, no fame." Just that, and for a mechanic, that was enough. There's a small plaque in the National Museum of the Marine Corps. You'll miss it if you're not looking closely. At the bottom of 87 names, carved in modest bronze letters, SSG Michael J. McCarthy, VMF, 213, Ordnance Crew. Most visitors pass by. But every once in a while, an old pilot or the son of one stops and reads it aloud. They don't need to know the details. They just nod quietly, because they know that sometimes wars aren't won by orders. They're won by ideas and by the courage to try them. Mickey McCarthy didn't change history with a weapon. He changed it with geometry, with trigonometry scribbled on a ration box, with 6 guns angled 2 degrees closer to truth. He proved that even in war, especially in war, the smallest details can mean the difference between chaos and victory. And so when you hear the thunder of a fighter jet slicing through the sky, Remember, the sound you're hearing, that echo of power, that certainty of aim, began with one man, a wrench, and a belief that good enough was never good enough. He didn't need a medal. He didn't need applause. He just needed those bullets to hit.